Bart Allen here. Thanks everybody for watching and listening and being a part of today's conversation. We have a very special guest. As always, we're chatting with actor and storyteller Erik Jensen. Big news. He is headed to Broadway. He's done a lot of things. And interestingly enough, I was watching reruns of The Equalizer the other night, and I saw you pop up on an episode. But I digress. And this is huge because it's your first run back to work after suffering a massive health crisis. And we'll get into all of that. But thanks for your time. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thanks for having me, Brett. I really appreciate it. It's nice to be here.
Yes. Well, let's talk about it. How are you feeling? What's the headspace? Because not only are you heading to a major Broadway production, but you're also recovering, I imagine, still probably to a point, and you're headed back to work. I mean, that's a lot happening, especially right before Christmas.
Well, when I say it's nice to be here, I really mean it's nice to be here.
I believe that. I 100% believe you.
Yeah, I had a in February, our show Coal Country that we wrote with Steve Earle, the alt country musician, was up and getting ready to rehearse. It was rehearsing at the Cherry Lane Theater, and I co-write with my wife when we on our writing projects, and she directs our theater. So I took a couple of days off to let her get silly with the actors, and I was home doing a therapy session with my shrink and online, and I said, "Oh, I have a headache," and I had a seizure, and then I passed out and blacked out immediately. My wife cut to the theater. Her phone was blowing up, and when they hit a break, she finally turned it over and saw there were 20 calls from my therapist and our assistant, who happened to be staying at our house during that time.
Wow.
And it turned out that I'd had a massive brain aneurysm, and this kind of aneurysm is called a subarachnoid hemorrhage, and it kills about half the people that it hits. And of the 50% who survive, approximately 80% have some kind of ongoing struggles with words and or some physical stuff. And I dodged all of God's machine gun full of bullets. I really he kicked the bucket for me, set it aright, and said, "Okay, as you were." And I'm in 100% good health right now. A lot of people really struggle with this after one of these, but I got very lucky, and I haven't had to struggle too hard at all.
Yeah, I imagine. I can't even fathom the idea of that. As I get older, I mentioned as we were before we started recording, having a child and thinking about my health, and you're a father, and really just all of the things, the accoutrements, so to speak, that go along with that. But I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do, but that's not something that you can really plan for.
No.
What I mean?
I mean, the only way to plan for it is to get an MRI if one is able to get that, or a CAT scan every year or two. And that's for me. I have good insurance through the Screen Actors Guild, so that's more of a privilege than it is a right. But it did get me on the straight and narrow in a way. So, during my recovery, I realized how many friends I had, which is a lot. We've built a really nice community here in New York. But then on a trip to London after I'd recovered, we went to see my friend Indira Varma in a production of The Seagull on the West End, and a woman named Emilia Clarke from the Game of Thrones.
Okay.
She's the mother of dragons in Game of Thrones. Amelia was performing in the play, and Amelia has had 2 aneurysms, all during Game of Thrones, one after the other. And I was watching her just brilliant, scintillating performance on stage. And after seeing this person who'd undergone basically the same thing that I had, with a lot more problems than I was having, I was like, I called my agents and said, "I just saw Emilia Clarke do an amazing thing. I want to do amazing things too. So can we go up for some bigger stuff and maybe take a bigger risk with my career?" And just 6-8 weeks after that, the collaboration came along, and I got it.
So how did your family feel about you going back to work after all of this? I mean, I'm sure obviously you've got a big thing coming, but were there a lot of conversations about the risk of potentially the stress and all of that that comes along with not only just doing anything creative, but also heading to Broadway?
My family was more nervous about me not being around. We've been since the pandemic, it's just been the Three Musketeers here in our house. And, my wife and I write together and we produce together and we direct films together. And my daughter and I really love each other. We spend a lot of time, watching movies and doing creative things together. And I think the real concern was like, what are we going to do when you're not around? Like, how are we going to stay close? Rather than worrying about any kind of stress. Cause I got my extra MRIs. I'm on really good medication right now. I got 100% clean bill of health from my neurologist. And, after that, the world to me looks just beautiful. And, I have a great, deep and abiding love and respect for the entire cast and crew that I'm working with right now. And, I'm acting with Paul Bettany, who's the Vision from the Avengers. So that makes me Avengers adjacent. I'm 1 degree of separation from a Marvel movie. I'm working with Krista Rodriguez, who's a Broadway stalwart, who's amazing. And I'm working with Jeremy Pope, who just got nominated yesterday for a Golden Globe Award for his performance in a new movie that's coming out called The Inspection. And so I've got to bring my A game with these people who are already bringing their A game, and that's a real privilege. And I'll say the real lion's work of the play is done by Paul and Jeremy. I'm there literally to support their story, and that's a really fine and noble thing to be doing. And I don't sweat it because it's A, it's work, and B, I'm very lucky to be making my Broadway debut. I'm seeing the world through rose-colored glasses right now, and I was expecting that to fade, but it's been since February, and I still get cranky occasionally, but a lot less than I used to. And I cut to the chase with things. I'm who do I want to spend time with? Like who's worth this small amount of time that I have left in the world? Who has, everybody has value, but who has value right now in terms of my general happiness? Am I going to be happy around this person? Am I going to be happy doing this project? And with the collaboration, the answer was a resounding yes.
Wow. So what has the response been so far? You're in previews now, or we'll be beginning previews soon?
Yeah, the response so far has been standing ovations pretty much every night. Now again, the house is all of our friends are coming to see it early now because the tickets are a little bit cheaper right now than they will be after we get an official opening going, and there's still some open tickets sometimes available for people, so we can slip people in the back. But the houses have been very friendly and have really embraced the play, and you're not supposed to say stuff like this when you're in the theater, but I would be very surprised if Paul and Jeremy didn't get nominated for some pretty cool things.
Wow, very fascinating. Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, you've been a part of a lot of projects. If you turn on the TV, you will show up in something at some point because you've just been all over the place and had a very robust career. Where did the journey begin for you as an actor and storyteller? When was that moment where you were exposed to it and you knew that you wanted to pursue it?
Oh, Brett, I'm so glad you asked that question. Okay, well, so the first thing that happened was I was a lot of pretending as a kid. We moved around a lot and there wasn't a lot of money. So, anything I could make with popsicle sticks and mud and pieces of cardboard and paper were pretty much my toys. So there was a lot of pretending that went along with that, a lot of reading. There were always a lot of books in my house. And then my family and I, a couple of years before my parents got divorced, started doing community theater in this little town called Detroit Lakes, Minnesota. And I discovered that I was really good at something that I had no idea that I was really good at. My dad and my uncles were always great storytellers, and I guess some of that rubbed off on me. And so I started doing community theater with Playhouse 412 in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota. Shout out to Playhouse 412. Doing things like The Music Man in Oklahoma, like pretty white bread musicals and things like that. And then divorce happened, and then I moved in with my stepdad and my mom, and I just happened to move into a school district where the theater program was run by three people: Polly Rykowski, my teacher Dennis Swanson, and this guy Kim Waltman, who had been an actor in New York, who had left acting to pursue teaching. And I was not an easy kid to get along with. I'd been I'd had a rough childhood. Let's just put it that way.
Okay.
And I carried a lot of that behavior, the behavioral stuff with me that comes along with that. And the first year that I was there was really rough. It was very up and down. I really wanted to do theater, but I wasn't mature enough to do it. And then one day, Dennis Swanson pulled me aside and he said, if you really focus and you really concentrate, you could do this for the rest of your life.
Wow.
And he said, come take my acting class and let's work slowly and methodically and see what you're capable of. And after that, I took his acting class, and then all of a sudden I was leads in all the shows, and we were winning state competition, one act festivals, and I was doing speech and declamation. Um, and um, and that was the beginning. And then Dennis helped me audition with my Shakespeare monologues and stuff for Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, which is one of the probably 8 best acting schools in the country. And I didn't quite get into Juilliard. My wife teaches there now, so I still pretend that I'm bitter about that. But I got into Carnegie Mellon, and a lot of great people have gone to Carnegie Mellon. All the cast of Hill Street Blues went there. Billy Porter went there. A lot of Broadway, a lot of people on Broadway have spent time at Carnegie Mellon University and have done very well by themselves. A lot of people on TV too. Zachary Quinto went there, who plays Spock in the Star Trek movies. Anyway, so that was my actor training, 4 years in Pittsburgh. And while I was in Pittsburgh, there were a lot of movies and TV movies that were going regional because there were these tax breaks and stuff that they
Yeah.
had. So I ended up doing a movie with Tony Danza, and I ended up doing a movie with Bruce Willis, and I ended up doing a movie with Valerie Bertinelli, and George Romero was my first director, and just like little parts, 2 lines here, 3 lines there, a couple of scenes. And so, I had to make a lot of my money refinishing houses, like doing hardwood floors and painting and stuff like that. But I was making about half my money doing films, and I hadn't left my second year of college yet. So finally I graduated and I ended up in New York, and then I started doing soap operas, and the rest really took off from there.
And there you are. And now you're headed to Broadway with some of the biggest names in the business. It's fascinating when I hear these stories because, it's an overnight success story that's been in the making for years and years, and hard work really works, and now you are reaping the benefits. As a side note, just like being Avengers adjacent, you could be Carnegie Mellon adjacent too, having your wife, be an instructor there. So
Uh-huh.
I think it's great. I mean, you've just really done well for yourself, and now you're continuing on. What is some of the best advice that you'd been given along the way that really stood with you as we wrap here to kind of carry you on throughout, the ups and downs of this career that you've had?
If you don't have any work, create your own. My
Mm-hmm.
wife and I ended up writing our playwrights as well. We ended up writing a play called The Exonerated that really launched our writing career, based on interviews with exonerated death row inmates from all over America. We ended up writing another play based on interviews with Iraqi refugees called Aftermath. My fascination with Lester Bangs was finally reached fruition with our stage play, How to Be a Rock Critic, which I did as a one-man play. Lester is a gonzo rock journalist, of rock and roll. He was the Hunter Thompson of rock and roll writing. And other things. Now I'm writing with David Simon, who's on The Wire, and I'm writing another TV thing with Ed Burns, who's also on The Wire. Create your own work. If the work's not coming, there are people and spaces and grants and organizations that will help you do a reading of a Chekhov play for no reason except to do the reading, who will let you work on a piece that you're developing, that you don't really know what it is yet, but you're working on it and working on it. And who knows, you could be the next Eric Bogosian, or you could be the next Sam Shepard. You know, you never know. There are a lot of actors out there who are actor writers, actor creators. And that's kind of one of the classes my wife teaches at Juilliard. And so I'm a big believer in making your own work. If it's not there for you, you have all the power in your hands.
I love it. That's why I started doing this, was because it's like, you know, the reality of perhaps maybe being on a television show or a entertainment reporter could potentially be there, but I'm doing it in my own way like this. You know what I mean? And I think
Yeah.
that's probably, out of anything I've learned talking to so many great people, is you just, if you want to do it, just do it
Yeah.
and work hard. And that's great. You're working with Ed Burns. What a very cool experience that has to be.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, and also I think another piece of great advice is admit that you don't know anything. I mean, we live in
Yeah.
a world right now where with Instagram and Twitter and all this stuff, people pretend that they know a bunch of stuff and think that that's a powerful position to have discourse from. And if you're having an artistic discourse, not knowing something is a beautiful thing. There will either be somebody there who will teach you how to do it or how it actually works, or a discussion will ensue that will educate you, and help you innovate and find something new to do. I mean, admitting that you don't know is not a disgrace. It's a strength, you know. And so I didn't know how I was going to approach this part before I got in the collaboration. I just knew that I met a Swiss guy who had a great Swiss accent, and when I was on vacation, and I put it in my toolbox, and I was like, well, let me start with that and see where that goes. And then, like, I learned things as I went along. My director taught me stuff. You know, my director and I, you know, I've been in you know, hundreds of TV shows and plays, and my director came in, and he came in and taught me, and I just am forever grateful for not knowing something and him having the answer. You know, so yeah, yeah,
Wow.
it's pretty great.
Very fascinating. One last question. What's the timeline for this to make it to Broadway? What are you still figuring all that out? Theaters and all of that stuff?
No, no, we're in previews now.
Okay. So you
We're
are
at
in
the
previews actually. Okay.
Yeah, we're at the Friedman, and MTC did a little workshopy thing, and then it premiered in England, in London, with Paul at the Young Vic, with Paul and Jeremy doing their parts, two different actors in the show, two British actors in the show. And then when it moved here, they needed some Americans in the cast for whatever reason, and they hired Krista Rodriguez and myself, and we are having the time of our lives. So,
Fantastic.
and it runs at the Friedman, at Manhattan Theater Club through January 20th, for sure, and there may be an opening there for an extension if we do well.
Awesome. Well, Erik, thank you for your time. Congratulations on all your success and your health, which is great. That's the most important thing. But yeah, I mean, it's just been a real pleasure chatting with you. I appreciate your time.